My name is Siyamamkela Mafu and my friends call me Siyama. I am from Pedi, which is a small place, rural areas located between King Williamstown and Makanda. That's where I was born and bred. So the schools I went to, Logical Primary School and Amaze Senior Secondary School, are in Pedi as well. So the subjects I did in high school were science and mathematical based. So that includes physical sciences and other science-related modules or subjects. Back then, I wanted to become a meteorologist, and that's why I done those subjects I chosen. However, the only mistake I did at that time, instead of choosing geography as one of the subjects, I chose agriculture, which was a bit of a problem if you want to become a meteorologist, because if you are a meteorologist, you're basically studying weather. Those guys who read about weather, or they analyze what, or they do forecasting of what weather is going to look like in the next few days or months or whatever. So if you miss that base or that foundation, you can't become a meteorologist. So that was the bad decision I had taken, but I don't really regret it. But as the years went by, when I was doing my grade 12, that's when I got introduced to IT. And I sort of had an interest about this after me and my friends were sitting kind of deciding or talking about what our futures looks like or looked like. And we were talking about what we want to become. Some others wanted to become pharmacists and doctors and all those things. And I had this deep interest in IT. So I went to look up what IT is about. At that time, I saw that there were 3 streams of IT: support services, communication networks, and software development. So after I finished my matric, I did not go well, unfortunately, the first time. Well, I did well for most subjects, but I didn't do well only in mathematics. So following year, after finishing off my matric, I went to upgrade my matric results. Then I joined, or I applied at Nelson Mandela University, which was Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University at the time. And yeah, I applied for IT support services. And the reason I chose IT support services was because when I read up their prospectus, they said, yeah, you're supporting the day-to-day running of businesses. I was like, okay, this is interesting. I want to be part of why businesses succeed. So after I upgraded my matric results for mathematics, I got accepted at Nelson Mandela University for IT support services. And the nice thing about what they do at NMMU is that when you're doing first year, you're doing I would say a cocktail of modules. You do some modules for programming, and you do some modules for support services, and you do some modules for communication networks. The reason why they do that is so that you get to decide which modules are you strong in, where do you find interest, so that when you're doing your second year, then you get to really decide that you want to do software development, communication networks, or support services. So I think around June in my first year, I was like, no, I'm not really interested in what they do in communication networks, because when you're doing communication networks, it's basically you're working on the telecommunication side of things, building up networks, and you're taking care of communication. So if someone is going to start a company, those people are going to go and build up a network, like your wireless, Wi-Fi, and all those things they do, setting up computers and all that stuff. So support services would then come in after, let's say, a guy from, or someone who's done communication networks is going to set up an IT infrastructure for a company. That's what communication networks is about. Then a support services guy, or someone who has studied IT support services, is going to maintain that infrastructure. That's what basically is done in those 2 streams. Then there's software development. Software development are people who are creating apps. They are creating mobile apps, your Android app, your iOS app, web applications. And I sort of got interested more into that. That's what got me hooked up. So I think around June, I went to the HOD, and I was encouraged by my friends. Because I wasn't really confident into changing this decision, because I was scared what my parents are going to say, and maybe there could be some unforeseen costs that are going to be a problem. So my friends, at the time, I spoke to them, I was like, hey, I really would like to change to IT software development as my area of specialization. And they encouraged me to do this, and they did show me that this is possible. So I was given a form, I went to the HOD, I told her that I would like to change to software development if I do well. And she checked my report, my progress report, and I was doing quite fine, or quite super well, in the modules that are related to programming. So those include development software, information systems. Those were the main related programming or programming related modules. And I was doing super well. Surprisingly, because I was new to IT, I didn't even know what programming was about until I did first year. So this was a bit of a shocker, but I did quite well. So following year, that's when I got to do IT software development as my mainstream. So when you're doing it third year, and now this is assuming that you have passed all your modules when you're doing your second year, you get to third year. You're also doing the modules you're doing previous year, just that you're now doing them at an advanced level. And the modules they add as part of your third year are project management, and you do a third year final project. And that final project is a group project. So we're a group of 4 guys, so there were 2 girls and 2 boys. The system we were designing, or we were doing when we were doing our third year, was a voting system. Basically, a voting system was to be used at NMMU, which is where we were studying. The aim behind it was to make sure, or to ensure that people, or students rather, get to vote online instead of going to some stations on campus to vote. The main idea when we designed the project was so that everyone could vote from anywhere around the country, or even internationally, as long as they are registered at NMMU. They didn't have to go on campus to go and cast their vote. They could vote from any time. So part of the system, there would be a user, or there was a role which you call an admin. An admin would then say the voting will happen from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the evening. So that would be an open session for someone to use our application to cast their vote for whatever organization they would like to vote for, and everyone at varsity who is a nominee would be voted for on the system instead of going on campus, which is convenient for a student to do this. So part of doing project management, the project management module would then teach you how to manage a project, how to ensure that a project is successful. So we did those. Those were the 2 extra modules you get to do amongst the other modules you're doing from your second year. My role in the project, I was a project leader. So basically my duties were to oversee that the project is running smoothly, we are delivering everything on time, and we run everything we do past our supervisor. So basically a supervisor is a lecturer. It could be someone who lectures you while you're doing a third year, or anyone who is a staff member of the university. So we're reporting to, well, my role would then be to keep constant communication with the supervisor, just to give some progress as to what we're doing, how far is it going, and sometimes we would meet with the supervisor just to give some progress to the supervisor. So when you're doing your third year, you get to delegate delegate some work amongst you, if that's how you want to run it. Other people would do documentation. So documentation is basically documenting down what the system is going to be about, and if we have features, what features are going to be there, or what is the system, what are the features that are going to be part of the system. So that's what documentation basically is about. And there will be people who are designing databases. How are you going to store data? Then there are people who are going to be implementing the system. So basically programming or coding it. Those are the terms that we use. You're going to be coding the system. So I think I was involved in almost all of those roles, excluding documenting, because I really wasn't good at doing documentation. My academic writing was quite poor. And people who did documentation, it did assess them as well, because most of them, when you go into further studies, if you want to do BTech, if you did documentation, you're likely to do well when you're doing your BTech. Because when you're doing BTech is basically a qualification you do after you complete your national diploma. So when you get to do BTech, you get to decide whether the project you're going to do, is it going to be a research project or it's going to be an applied project. So between these two, you sort of decide when you're doing your third year that which one are you going to go for. So if you find your strengths in doing coding and doing the database design, you're likely to do applied project, which is more coding, just that you're going to be doing it alone. And if you did documentation, a lot of documentation when you're doing your third year, you're likely to go for a research project when you're doing your BTech. So I stuck to doing applied project when I was doing my BTech. So after BTech, I went to work as a software developer. I was a junior software developer for 6 months in a small company, a startup company. There I was introduced to some new technologies that I did not learn about when I was in university. So it was a bit of a culture shock. I did not really expect that. I wish I could have learned those things when I was in university, because I had time to learn those things. But now I was forced to learn those technologies in that new workplace, and it took me some time. But I mean, I eventually got to find my feet at work. But the guys I was working with, because when you are a senior developer, when you're a junior developer, rather, you get assigned to a senior developer, right? So it's someone who's going to sort of look after you, like to give you some directions, and they're project managers. So I was very, very fortunate that I got to a team of very, very nice people. So they got to show me the ropes, how to do stuff. Because a lot of technologies that we used there, like they were super new to me. Not completely different from Varsity, but it's some stuff that Varsity doesn't teach you. Varsity is going to teach you how to code, but it doesn't tell you that there are so many languages that you're going to use when you get to the industry. For example, when you go to Nelson Mandela University, there's a programming language that we call C#. That's a Microsoft language. But when you get to a workplace now, they're like, no, we're going to be using Java. That's what we're using here. So if you learned C# in university, you have to unlearn all of that. Not really unlearn though, because the logic remains the same, just that now you have to learn a new language, but the logic remains the same. Currently, I'm working as a software engineer at Batsamai Software Development. It's a company that's located here in Gqeberha. The services that we render here are software solutions, which include software engineering, automation engineering, and quality assurance. Batsamai Software Development has a team that consists of software engineers, software quality engineers, and business analysts. So the way they fit in together is that if, let's say, we have a new project that we have just accepted, so it would go from the business analyst, which we call a BA. So a business analyst is the person who is responsible for giving us or telling us what the features of that systems are. So if we're designing a new system, we get to read from that specification document that these are the features of this system that we are going to work on, and this is what each feature does, or this is how it should work. So when we get that, second to that specification document, there is what we call a mockup. So a mockup is basically a design of what the end product is going to look like. It's just it's like an image of what exactly the system is going to look like, and it's supposed to make like some sort of a flow of how you go from one screen to another screen, so that when software engineers get to implement that, they are basing that based on the specification document and the mockup. So when we get those, then software engineers, which is what I do, we implement that in terms of coding. So we're making sure that we create the system that is going to meet the requirements as specified in that specification document, and it has to look exactly as what we have in that wireframe. So once we've done that, the third phase or the final phase after software engineers are software quality engineers. Software quality engineers are basically, they also have that specification document and that wireframe, and they check our work as software engineers. So they're going to check if what we've developed is exactly, or it meets the requirements as specified in that specification document. If something is wrong or it's not working as specified in that spec doc, the specification document, we call it a spec doc. So if the requirements are not met, they bring it back to us and say, this needs to be done, or this is what is missing, or this system is breaking when you do 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's not as clean, or it's not as efficient or effective as expected. And the point of having those people, software quality engineers, so that before something is delivered to a client, it's working as smoothly as possible. So that's how the flow goes. So it goes from the business analyst to software engineer. Software engineers are the people who are implementing the system. Once we're done with each feature, we take it to a software quality engineer and say, please test this and make sure that I've met the requirements that I was given. The project that I'm currently working on is called PlantSap. PlantSap basically is a tool that is used by farmers to monitor the health of their crops that they grow in their fields or farms. So obviously a farm can have more than one farm, and the system does cater for that. So in each farm, a farmer can create multiple fields in the system, so that he can manage all of his fields in the system, and they are able to keep track of which field has what type of crop grown in it. So the system does cater for that. So basically what PlantSap is doing in a bit of more detail is that the farmer is going to send out some leaves to the lab, a new leaf and an old leaf of a plant. And those leaves are going to be analyzed. Basically a farmer is going to pick up leaves from his field that he would like to have analyzed, and those leaves are going to be sent to the lab. Once they get to the lab, the leaves are going to be analyzed by first pressing the leaf so that there's a juice that comes out of each leaf, and the juice that is going to come out of that leaf will be analyzed to check for all the nutrients or elements in that juice, so that we're able to detect what is lacking and what is quite excess in that plant. So once the results are back from the lab to the farmer, the system is going to make recommendations to a farmer and say, this is what is lacking and this is what you should do to make sure that there is enough of it. If there's excess of a certain nutrient or an element, it's going to make a recommendation that this is what you should apply to kind of reduce whatever that is excess. So that is what basically PlantSap is doing. So when the project began, the process that we had to follow began from the BA. So the BA basically sat down to write the requirements of the system and wrote them in detail as to what each feature is going to do, such as creating a field on your farm, deleting a field or editing a field or changing a crop that you are growing in that field. Because sometimes farmers tend to rotate crops. So there's what we call crop rotation. So sometimes in field A you may grow this year onions, next year you're going to grow beetroots or cabbages, like you change quite maybe annually. So all of those things we know from the spec doc that is given to us as developers, as designed by the business analyst. So when we have that specification document, also we do have a mock-up that was also designed by the BA. So basically, a mock-up helps us to know what we're developing. So we know exactly how the system is going to look like when it's in front of a user, and we know the processes that are within that functionality from the specification document. So the mock-up basically just shows you how the system is going to look, and the specification document tells you what the feature is going to do, or what does that feature entail. So we use those two to make sure that we as software engineers are implementing exactly what is required by the client. Once we're done with each feature, we push it, or we say release. So releasing is saying you are publishing this so that the tester or a software quality engineer is going to be able to test this in a certain environment. So once the software quality engineer tests, he has to have the specification document that was designed by the business analyst, and the mock-up that was designed by the business analyst, the same that the software engineer is used. So the software quality engineer is going to check against those requirements that were noted down in that specification document if the system is meeting them. And in terms of the UI, so UI is how it's a user interface. UI refers to user interface. It refers to how the system looks. They're going to use that mock-up to see if the developers or the software engineers have met the requirements. If something has gone wrong, it's going to be taken back to a software engineer, and you'll be required to fix that as a software engineer. Then you push it again to the software quality engineer until the software quality engineer is happy that you have met the requirement. Once that process is done, then we go and demo. So a demo is showing off what the feature is, what it looks like to the client. Once the client is happy, then we're done with that feature, we move on to the next feature. What I basically like about software engineering is that it's challenging me, and I'm learning something new almost every day. So I learn something new about, well, it's kind of, if I would break it down, I learn something new in terms of coding. There are new concepts that I have to learn, like almost every day. There's always something new to learn to improve your code. So that for me, it's a nice challenge. And secondly, you get to learn about industries, because if you're software engineering, you are working with businesses. Right now, I'm working with PlantSap, which is focused in the agricultural sector. I've developed an application for the education sector. So you learn almost every day. You work with different industries. You're developing applications for different people, for different business needs. And that is quite fun. That is what gets me up in the morning. What would make someone a successful software engineer or an IT person, if I would put it like that? It's continuous improvement. It's knowing that you are not at where you want to be every day. Never say you know enough, because in honesty, you don't. So basically, if I would speak for myself as a software engineer, I have to practice coding almost every day. I have to look at how I could make things better. I think that's number one. That's the number one thing you need to ensure that you continue to learn how you could make things better. I remember when I was a student, I was just writing code for the sake of making a functionality work. But things have changed now. Now that I think I've been working in the IT sector for about 3 years. So right now, it's not just about making a code or a functionality work. It's not just about putting code together. It's about making sure that the code that I write, someone else who is going to come after me, if I were to leave this company, is going to be able to look at that code and will be able to easily understand what that code does. So that's what makes you stand out. You learn every day. There's a new technology that's coming out today, and there's a new technology that's coming out tomorrow. So it's all about how you could make yourself better, and if you try as much as you can to make yourself better, like to be knowledgeable of what's happening around you, then you are going to succeed. That's your competitive advantage. You need to make sure that you know quite a lot. That's what IT people do. they are studying almost every day. Not really studying as in looking at books, but you're reading articles of what's the new technology, that's the latest, why should you pursue that technology, how is it going to help you grow in your career. Because basically in IT, some things evolve, some things fade away. So you need to make sure that you're moving with the pace of these new technologies. Well, number one, if there's someone out there who is maybe doing matric or who is in high school right now and is considering doing IT, I would strongly recommend that they do study IT. I mean, IT these days, it's becoming more and more in demand. That's where the world is going. The world is going IT now, it's going digital. You can see everyone's working from home, and there are more opportunities that come with that. So if even the businesses, they are going digital now, they are moving away from the manual-based systems. So everyone now is sort of employing people who are in IT, especially in software development. Not to say that the other streams are not important, but software developers are people in IT now that are in high demand. So I would strongly recommend that they do study IT or encourage them to do software development as a course or a qualification. To someone who is in varsity right now and is doing their final year, I strongly recommend that you learn as much as you can. Make sure that if you are doing a third year or a fourth year or final year, please make sure that your project succeeds and you get a good mark, because that is your selling point. When you go for an interview, you have to brag about what your project was about, what were the successes, or what made your project successful. So basically your final year project is your selling point when you get to the industry, because they are going to ask you what sort of project did you work on when you're doing your final year project, what technologies were you exposed to or did you use. So if you haven't used all of those technologies the company requires, you're likely not to meet the requirements of that job, because they are going to sort of check you if you do have the fundamentals. So it's quite important that you do well in that project. It's your breaking point.